Hello everybody, good evening. Welcome to this meeting with our special guests here. Ambiga Sreenevasan, who I don't think needs that much introduction to you. Possibly, I would say, the best known and most respected democracy rights activist from Malaysia. Welcome. Before we start today, I'd like to acknowledge that we are meeting today here on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. These are the original inhabitants whose land on which we meet. It's land that's never been ceded, and we pay our respects to their elders past and present. And it's very important that we acknowledge this as an act of respect, the kind of respect that I think the movement that we're about to hear about is seeking to fight for and to have in Malaysia. Now, the format tonight is going to be quite informal. Ambiga is going to address us for a while, and then there's going to be a question and answer session. And it will not only be people who are participating who are in this room, but we are connected by Google Hangout and through Twitter to people in many other places, including in Malaysia and in other parts of the world, who will be able to not only listen and watch the talk today, but also to ask questions. So please be mindful that when it comes to question and answer time, I will be having to moderate not only the people in this room, but also people who are connected via the internet. If the internet's working. Is it working?
Yes,
What?
it's
I think there's a technical problem. Okay, now I will go through a bit of housekeeping rules first, so that this event is being put on by Global Bersih and Sydney Bersih, which is a small activist group here, and it's very important that you put your name down if you haven't already on the contact list, so that in future we've been organising quite a few gatherings like this, but it's hard to get a message out. We don't have a lot of money, we can't take big advertisements, but word of mouth is very powerful. So if you put your name down on the contact list, we'll get word of any future events to you, and you can tell your friends, and and hopefully the word will get out far and wide. So first, please remember, if you haven't already, put your name down on the contact list, even if you think you have before. Our organisation is not that super, so maybe you lost it, so I would encourage you to do it again. As you will see, there are some drinks that are on sale outside. Now, I would like to ask you to please be conscious of taking your containers back out when we finish. It's a very strict rule here. We want to use this excellent venue once again. I would also like to ask you, if you haven't already, please switch off your mobile devices or put them onto silent, so we are not interrupted during today. So, how are we going here? Are we going? I forgot to say, Ambiga, I didn't introduce you by your title. But actually, I'm saying, as a point of principle, I would prefer to go straight to Ambiga.
Yeah.
In this country, Australia, we've had an unfortunate experience recently of going back 30 years, the reintroduction of Sir and Dame. I think one of the good things about Australia is well, it's the supposed values of egalitarian, which is being somewhat challenged these days. And I think, you're happy?
Yep.
There's no mark of disrespect. So, guys, are we going?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll go on to the next thing. Now, the committee made a suggestion, which I would like to put to this meeting, before we start with the formal proceedings, that we also pay our respects to another very important fighter for democracy in Malaysia, who unfortunately passed away recently. and that is Irene Fernandez. Now, I'm going to ask a favor of you, Ambiga. Before we get down to the substance of your speech today, would you mind doing a brief introduction, and then we will do 1 minute silence before we get into the substance?
Yes.
Okay? Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. I think it is fitting and absolutely appropriate that we talk about the life of Irene Fernandez a little bit and remember her as one of the warriors who have been fighting for human rights long before I ever started, actually. And when I look at people like Irene and Lim Kit Siang, who have been fighting for years and years and years, they fought at a time when it was much more difficult to fight, I can tell you. Because if they were hauled up or they were questioned, very often that information wouldn't get out to the public. The advantage we have today, if we are attacked in any way, it is immediately communicated to the public. But people like Irene fought at much more difficult times. And I feel sorry for the migrant community because they really and truly have lost one of the most courageous advocates. Irene was not spared, as you all probably know. Because of the wonderful work that she was doing, she wrote a report about the abuse that migrants were facing in detention. And for that, for telling the truth, she faced charges over a period of 13 years. She had to go to court, and eventually the matter was dropped, although she was found guilty. She thought she was going to jail, and then there was a stay. But nevertheless, it hung over her for 13 years before the government then didn't proceed for various reasons. So they didn't leave her alone, and all she did, as I said, was to tell the truth. So she represents so much. She's larger than life, as far as I'm concerned, because she took up issues that many people didn't even think were important. Issues about trafficking. People don't realize what a huge problem we have in Malaysia with regard to trafficking, and the treatment of refugees, the treatment of migrant workers. So they are the ones who have lost a great advocate for their cause. And as far as we are concerned, civil society, we have lost one of our most courageous warriors. And with that, may I invite all of you here to stand up and observe 1 minute silence in the memory of the wonderful Irene Fernandez. May her soul rest in peace. Thank you. Shall I just start? Okay. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Sydney. It's wonderful to be here again. So much happens every time I give a speech and I come back. There's so much more that has happened in our country that is of grave concern. Now, one of the things I'd like to tell you about is the work of Bersih, what we did after the 13th general elections. And of course, before I go there, let me first congratulate Global Bersih for their registration, for the fact that you're all working together, and I wish you the very best of luck. I think we have a wonderful group of people who comprise Global Bersih. Global Bersih to me is really the pride and joy, one of the pride and joys of Bersih. It is a movement that has grown in a sense by itself. It just happened and you've all built on it, and I'm very, very happy to be here on your behalf and at your invitation. Thank you very much, William, and your committee. Thank you so much. Now, the People's Tribunal was set up by Bersih after the 13th general elections, and the reason we did that was, as you know, after the 13th general elections, or during or just in the run-up to it, we had so many complaints of fraud that we knew was going to take place. Now, as you know, in general elections, it is not the fraud on the day alone that is of significance. In fact, elections are generally won or lost by the time you come up to the election day, because a lot of things were put in place so that the party in power could ensure its success in the general elections. And of course, we know this has been happening. It's been happening for years, except things became far more urgent for them, because there was talk of losing power for the first time. It was unthinkable for this government to even conceive of the possibility that they may no longer be in power, and therefore everything that they could do to ensure that they stay in power, they did. And that is the position of Bersih. As far as we were concerned, we saw so many flaws in the electoral process. We actually had our own pemantau, our own observation for the first time, and we issued a report. But nevertheless, there were so many complaints that we decided that it was best to leave the ascertainment of the facts to an independent tribunal. Irene was part of that committee, and I remember when I suggested it, I said we must do this because the bar has done it before. We actually set up a panel of eminent persons to look into the 1988 crisis, and they came up with a report. So we decided to do the same thing. That was to do the same thing here. And in fact, it was Irene who said, let's call it the People's Tribunal. And that's why it's special for me as well, because it is Irene who named it the People's Tribunal, and that's because she has had experience in Philippines, etc., with people's tribunals. Now, why do people do this? Why do citizens turn to an alternative? Why indeed? It's because they lose faith in the institutions who are supposed to deal with these sorts of issues. We have laws. We have election laws. We have Election Offences Act, many, many laws, okay, by the way, under the Penal Code, etc., for bribery, corruption. But none of it is implemented. It's as if the laws are suspended during campaign period. The laws are suspended on voting day. The principles of the caretaker government also suspended. Everything is in a state of suspension, including the Election Commission, who is supposed to look into and ensure adherence to our laws. So it's not that we don't have laws. We do. The problem is they're not implemented. Then, of course, that is that part of it. Who do you go to if you want these laws implemented? You go to the courts. Who do you file your petitions? Where do you file your petitions if you want to challenge elections? You would file it and you would appear in court. But even that system is fraught with problems, because 99% of all these petitions have been thrown out on purely technical grounds. Not only that, prohibitive amount of costs were ordered. hundreds of thousands sometimes, 100,000, 200,000, 50,000, those sorts of costs. Who can afford it? These candidates are supposed to pay these costs. And because of that, many of the candidates didn't want to appeal the decisions because they were so afraid that they would incur further costs and that the courts would order further costs against them. So the effect, it had its effect. The effect was to discourage people from going to court. But that's not what our courts are there for. They're not there to discourage people from coming to it. They must encourage access to justice. So that and many of the other things that were problems in the 13 general elections were brought before this People's Tribunal. And we had a very distinguished tribunal of 5 people. It took us a while to set it up because it's not easy to set up such a tribunal. But let me tell you who the people were who constituted this tribunal. We had Professor Yash Pal Gai from Kenya. He was the chair of the tribunal. He is an expert in constitutional law and human rights, emeritus professor of public law, University of Hong Kong, chair of the Kenya Constitution Review Commission and chair of the National Constitutional Conference. Then we had Professor Ramlan Subakti from Indonesia, professor of comparative politics at Airlangga University, Surabaya, deputy chairman of the Indonesian Election Commission in 2001 to 5, acting chair in 2005 to 7, senior advisor on elections in the Partnership for Governance Reform in Indonesia since 2008. We then had Dato' Azad bin Kamaluddin, an advocate and solicitor of the High Court of Malaya, former administrative and diplomatic officer with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Malaysia, Dr. Mavis Puducherry, a Malaysian, former associate professor at the Faculty of Economics and Administration, University of Malaya, a co-editor of a book entitled Elections and Democracy in Malaysia, Reverend Dr. Herman Shastri, a Malaysian Methodist minister, General Secretary of the Council of Churches of Malaysia, CCM, member of the Executive Committee of Malaysian Consultative Council of Buddhism, Christianity, Hinduism, Sikhism and Taoism. Those were the 5 wonderful people who sat as commissioners. And it was important, as members of the tribunal. And it was important because people asked the question, look, Bersih is appointing this committee. Of course it's going to be biased. So he said, no. Look at the people who are sitting there. We had to ensure that they were people who would be accepted as the kind of people who could not be interfered with, whether by Bersih or anybody else, that they would be absolutely independent and that they would be true to the rule of law. And those were the kinds of people that were appointed. And they have come up with their report. We launched, they handed over the report to the new Bersih chairman. There are a few editing requirements and it should be published in the next 1 or 2 weeks. The summary of the findings, by the way, is available on the Bersih website. But let me tell you some of the findings. They were scathing about the Election Commission, and they should be. They basically said they were not independent, and we all know that, by the way. We all could see that the Election Commission was acting like a mouthpiece of the government. They made certain key findings. They said there was failure to ensure proper custody of ballot boxes and other materials, which suggests more serious failures. They said registering people to vote who have not applied cannot be just a mistake. They said the EC staff must have been at least complicit. Then gerrymandering constituencies requires the involvement of some in the EC, again at a high level. Failure to get ink that is indelible, is totally inexcusable, and would implicate some at high levels in the Election Commission. And they go on and on. I'm not going to go into all of the details. They said there was certainly a problem with the electoral roll. They made reference to the Sabah Royal Commission of Inquiry. You know about that? The Sabah Royal Commission of Inquiry, by the way, till to date we have no report. They made reference to that. And they said, what was the impact of all these irregularities? And by the way, they were also scathing about the gerrymandering, because a lot of evidence was produced in relation to that. Before I go on, I must say to you that the lead counsel in this case was Gurdial Singh Nijat, an extremely senior and well-known advocate and solicitor who is now a professor at University of Malaya. And he took the lead, and in fact he has experience because he appears in the Malaysian Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Tribunal. So he has experience. And he worked with a band of 30 to 40 lawyers. That's the kind of work that went into this tribunal report. And I would urge you and invite you to please read it. And it should be up on the website in 2 to 3 weeks. We will let you know once it's fully published. Now, coming back to the findings. So, they asked themselves, what was the impact on the outcome of the elections? And this is what they said. Errors, deliberate or otherwise, are regrettable. Like the administration of justice, perceptions are crucial. Justice must not only be done, but must be seen to be done. And if it seems not to have been done, the damage is almost complete. But it also matters whether the errors actually have an impact on the results. The evidence to the tribunal suggests that the outcome of the election was not to be laid at the door of the first-past-the-post electoral system, though that system does lay the basis for manipulation. Gross malapportionment of constituencies is a very major explanation. Doubt over the validity of postal and advance votes is also of great significance, as there were at least 30 parliamentary seats where the contest was very close and where these votes could have influenced the overall outcome. And some individual constituency results also stood out as having perhaps been influenced by other malpractices. The tribunal determines that large numbers of irregularities and illegalities were committed in the conduct of GE13 sufficient to render the results in numerous constituencies void. Overall, taking into account the macro level of apportionment, there is some reason to believe that the wrong party was declared to have won the 2013 elections. That's a damning conclusion. And then they go into, of course, they set out the broad parameters of an elections, and this is their ultimate conclusion. In the event that the tribunal found that the elections violated standards of free and fair elections, it is required to make, recommendations. Sorry, that's the wrong finding. I go to the last page. Basically, as far as the tribunal was concerned, they found that every single parameter for elections to have integrity, basically in relation to equal representation, electoral laws and regulations, free and fair contestation, which relates to the media, participation of all stakeholders, an independent and professional electoral management body, electoral integrity in voting, and finally electoral dispute resolution. They found that in each and every instance, each of those parameters was breached in the 13th general election. So I would invite you, please read this report, because that really says it all. It says everything that we had suspected. So there you have the People's Tribunal report. What are we going to do with it? Well, first of all, we want to publicize it. We're going to use it for advocacy. There are recommendations that have been made. We want to make sure that the 14th general elections does not suffer the same problems. And already we can see, by the way, the day after the 13th general elections, the Barisan Nasional has already started working for the 14th general elections. Make no mistake about that. Because they were very concerned, they were very shaken by what happened in the 13th general elections. Now, so we can see that the next process, which is the redelineation process, is going to face problems. This gerrymandering is not going to stop. In fact, they're going to entrench their position further because they feel insecure in certain constituencies. And we hear that they're going to, of course, make it as watertight for themselves as they can. So Bersih has its work cut out for it. We actually have set up a program where we're training members of the public to object to some of these things. But of course you know that at the end of the day, once it goes to Parliament, simple majority, and they will get whatever they want through. And our basic problem is we don't have an independent EC. That really and truly is the basic problem. So, and they're still there. That's the other problem. These Malaysians in power do not embarrass easily. In fact, they do not embarrass at all. They have no shame, let me put it very blankly and bluntly. Because the way people more or less told them, for God's sake, get out. And I think that's remembering what you said just now, Dean. For goodness sakes, Election Commission, step down. We don't have confidence in you. Under the federal constitution, you have to be a body who enjoys public confidence. But, you know, we said it till we were blue in the face and we won't stop saying it. They're still there. They're still there. Because they don't see anything wrong with what they've done. So, there you are. We're stuck with them. We have a problem. We have a problem that we have to deal with. But that's not the only problem, the question of elections. It is the whole system. And you have seen the political persecution of Anwar Ibrahim. And I had a reporter from overseas ask me actually, how many people have been charged with sodomy, you know, ever in Malaysia? And I know that there have been one or two. But, you know, I said this charge is reserved for the leader of the opposition. Special. Okay? It's specially for the leader of the opposition. What happened? He was acquitted in the High Court. And normally, it's very hard to upset the findings of the High Court judge because he heard the evidence, he saw the people in the witness box. He would have judged credibility. So it's not impossible, but it is difficult, unless he made a serious error of law. Anyway, it went up to the Court of Appeal, and then there was argy-bargy about whether Tan Sreenevasan, Shafi, should act. Anyway, ultimately he did. But that's all, to me, not the issue. The issue is the manner in which that appeal was treated. It was rushed through. As you know, because of the Kajang move, the nominations for Kajang was to take place on the Tuesday, and they rushed the case through. They sat till I think 6 or 7 o'clock, and they gave their decision on the Friday before that. And that, I know that's the 7th, because I know that MH370 happened the next day. That was the 8th of March. So that was the 7th, and it was pushed through, rushed through. And I know that when it came to mitigation, you know what mitigation is? That is when they find an accused guilty and they give an accused, the accused a chance to speak for himself, through his lawyer, of course, most of the time. To speak to himself and say why the sentence should not be a heavy sentence. So they said, no, we're not going to give you time for mitigation. So Karpal Singh said, look, I need to bring the medical reports. And so, no, we will assume, Shafi said, we will assume that he has illness. Shafi also, Tan Sri Shafi also objected to any adjournment. And it was the unholy haste with which they rushed through it. that was of concern, great concern to us. Of course, at the end of the day, the minimum jail time is 5 years, so they can actually argue it makes no difference, your mitigation or whatever. But why did they have to do that? Certainly, justice was not seen to be done on that day. And if you had heard the arguments that were made, I was surprised, certainly, at the decision. So, that's one. Political persecution, Anwar Ibrahim. Look at Karpal. What have they done to Karpal? 4,000 ringgit fine. I was in court when the argument over sentencing took place. And I was so utterly disgusted and horrified with the way in which the Attorney General's chambers gunned for Karpal. And they were arguing strenuously for a custodial sentence of this 73-year-old man in a wheelchair, charged for sedition for the first time. Pushing for custodial sentence. And by the way, they didn't get a custodial sentence now on appeal, they're still pushing for a custodial sentence. What kind of an AG's chambers does that? What kind of a public prosecutor's office does that? They let murderers, etc. off, no problem. But this man, and in fact those words arguably were not even seditious. You know what those words are. We shouldn't even have a sedition act, for goodness sakes. England, where it all started, they've done away with it. We shouldn't even have that act. So that's Karpal. So his is coming up, the appeal is coming up. If it's 4,000 ringgit, he loses his seat in parliament. Are they so scared of the opposition in this country, in Malaysia? Clearly. Because they're not the only ones. Tian Chua has a sedition charge coming up. Rafizi has one coming up. Haris Ibrahim, whom you heard, I believe, in this very room, has a charge coming up. And they carry on and on in this fashion. And the Prime Minister last year had said, we are going to repeal the Sedition Act. The minute he finished saying that, there were charges against several people under the Sedition Act. So this is a government, well, I don't even know how to begin, actually. I don't even know where to begin to describe this government. But what I can say is that, then of course you remember the racial and religious tension that was building up. Many of you may not know what was happening at home. But Kit Siang was coming out and saying, look, this is getting ridiculous. He was talking about people deliberately building up racial tension, and we all felt it, by the way. And to me, it was the good sense, because of the good sense of the Malaysian people, that it didn't deteriorate, the situation didn't deteriorate into racial riots. Because Malaysians could see what these people were doing, and they kept on at it. You remember after the elections, the attacks on the Chinese, and then all, attacks on the Christians, burning effigies, those sorts of things. And they didn't care, and they kept incendiary behavior that was really meant to create a problem. Then 370 happened. MH370 happened. And for the first time, everything that is wrong with the country came into sharp focus so that the whole world could see it. And I think you all stand with me when I say that we stand in solidarity with all the passengers and their families of MH370. And we cannot even begin to imagine the pain that they have gone through. And in the first, I think our search and rescue efforts were good. But we don't have key answers to what happened in that first 48 hours after the plane went missing. 2 days ago, we have CNN, and this is the second time it's happening, CNN reporting, Malaysian official says, planes were scrambled. 1 day later, the minister says, it's a lie. The planes were never scrambled, only they were scrambling. The planes were never scrambled. So what? Who is telling the truth? Number one, why is CNN not making sure, confirming its reports with the minister before it's issued? And number two, who is this official who is giving this information? And you remember there were some other things that were released as to the missing of the radar, of the Indonesian radar, the flight path, etc., etc. So, I don't know what's happening. I don't know what's going on. And that's how the families feel. If that's how we feel, can you imagine how the families feel? And there is no excuse for that. Of course, they love coming out and saying, you must be united. Oh, we know how to be united. But we are united as a people behind and in solidarity with the passengers and the families on MH370. We are united with them. Being united and standing with them does not mean that we condone lack of transparency by the government in relation to this issue. There's a difference between uniting with your government and being united as a nation in a time of crisis. And to me, it is the highest loyalty to the country when you expect the best standards of behavior from your leaders. And that's what we are asking for. So, we hope and pray that that will be resolved and we get some answers. And you know that there are things that are gaps in the information, the cargo manifest and so on. But anyway, there may be good reasons why those are not being released. But unfortunately, we are getting the feeling that not all is being told to the families and to us. And you see, what was interesting about 370 is that the Malaysian, and somebody wrote about this and said, oh, the Malaysian press were asking very timid questions, and the foreign press were the ones who were asking the tough questions. And of course, they were balking because never did they have to be so accountable. So they started with stupid statements, which normally, of course, is acceptable in Malaysia, because the press accepts it, and then we carry on. And many of us who know it's stupid, we just ignore it. Okay? But no, not in this situation. It cannot be when there are lives that are lost. You cannot behave like that when people have lost lives. So, like deer caught in the headlights, okay, in some instances. But it's good. It is a good lesson. It shows that accountability, that it requires high standards of accountability. So there you are. It was a lesson for us too, that maybe we too have been allowing our leaders to just get away with giving us nonsense answers. And that too has to stop. That too has to stop. So, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Of course, when we criticize, and I know, when this is now, I think it's recorded and it's heard in Malaysia, etc. They say, all these people who criticize must leave the country. Sorry, love, we're not going anywhere. Okay? We are not going anywhere. We're going to stay there and we are going to keep asking you questions. Because this time, it's about people's lives. And we will not stop until we have got answers. From everyone. I also questioned CNN. Why is CNN releasing information from a Malaysian official without checking with the minister? What's going on? What is it that's happening? So, you also know that recently the UN students, I was banned from speaking in University of Malaya, and I know that Tony Pua has been banned speaking here. But the UN students, and this is why I say there's hope. The UN students, whole group of them, and I was really shocked actually, and I was pleasantly surprised when they started a petition, and they handed a petition over to some of the MPs in Parliament saying, we want academic freedom. And they made such a huge fuss about the fact that they stopped me speaking that it's become embarrassing for UN. Now, these are our children, okay? The Australian, I think it's Moscow, wasn't it, where Tony was supposed to speak as a panel, but disappointingly, the student body didn't push it. Although they're here, they're not in Malaysia. So, the students of Malaysia are beginning to fight. That's the good news. And then, of course, and that's why I say things are changing. I'm finishing, and then I will open the floor for questioning. Then, of course, every year, year in, year out, and I remember when I came and spoke in Sydney 2 or 3 years ago, I talked about the Auditor General's report. This great report that is released, and then we are all horrified by the corruption that is going on, and yet again, we were not disappointed. We were not disappointed. We are never disappointed by the corruption disclosed in the Auditor General's report. But then, what do they do about it? And it's all these things. Corruption has eaten away at our society. Everything, even I put it down to dealing with the issue of 370, etc. It all boils down to a lack of basic integrity. Because there's corruption, because it's allowed. Because that kind of behavior is acceptable. Because accountability, no need lah. Abuse of power, yeah, no problem, I have power, what? I can use, I can abuse. Because they don't understand the rule of law. They don't understand the difference between rule of law, rule by law. In fact, they don't care. They just don't care. So what are we going to do about it? What are Malaysians going to do about it? Are we going to say this is acceptable? Because it is not. It is not acceptable. I may be dramatic. Some people may say I'm going too far, but I don't think so. Because my eyes were really opened when I saw what happened at 370, the handling of 370. It's frightening. Our level of competence is frightening. Now I don't say, and here we must give credit to those involved in the SRA efforts, Malaysians included. A few days after the incident, I think we started getting our act together, and we did a good job. But I still say the key focus is what happened in that first 48 hours. So I'm going to stop there because I can go on and on. And the reason I go on and on is because I really do think that we need to say enough is enough. We need to make our voices heard. We have to stop being afraid. Students have to stop being afraid. People want to ban, take it up. Fight it. BTN is another thing. BTN, which is entirely about brainwashing, has to be stopped. The officials may do it, but what about parents? If I was a parent, I will not allow my child to be brainwashed in that way. But unfortunately, a lot of the parents don't even know what is happening. But it is time for parents to say, no, we will not allow you to do this to our children. You should say, how dare you? That's what parents should be saying. So, these are the things, these are the challenges that we have. We have a mindset problem. Don't get me wrong. In the last GE13, why? Why was it urban voted a particular way, rural voted a different way? Because we have failed to reach out to the rural areas. And that's where our work is cut out for us for the next general elections. All we're saying is, we're not going to tell them how to vote, but they need to be educated about choices. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I'll be very happy to take your questions now. In fact, I'd like to hear your views actually. What was the title of today? It was
Meet and Greet.
Meet and Greet. Okay, so so I will wait for you to tell me what you think. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay.
I just need to write.
Yeah. Now we come to the interesting part, questions and answers. I'd like to let you know about another censored person that you will have an opportunity to meet if you leave your contact details on the list. And that is one of the Tony Puas coming down on the 21st of May. I think we haven't finalized the details of where exactly we're going to meet. April, sorry. It's May, April. So it's very soon, but if you put your details down on the contact list, we can let you know how you can meet Tony Puas. So now we were having some technical problems. We couldn't actually broadcast Ambiga's talk on Google Hangout as we wanted to, but you know, Ambiga, you're talking about the necessity for perseverance, I think.
Yes.
And some Malaysians, at least one, has been very persevering, and he's still using the Google Hangout to ask a question. So while you people here are thinking about your questions, I might read out the question that came in while the talk was going on. Okay. The question is from Guan Singh, and it is: politics in Malaysia in the form of Barisan versus Pakatan has become too antagonistic. You're either with us or against us. That's not helpful in shifting the middle ground and forming healthy political culture. What do you think, and what can be done?
Thank you, Guan Singh. He's right, actually. Everything is about BN versus Pakatan or Pakatan versus BN. It's true. But that's the way it is. That's the way, if you have multi-party democracy, of course now we have two-party democracy, this is how it starts. But of course I am not a political analyst, and I know there are a few of them sitting here, so I will not dare to give my views on that. In fact, I'd like to hear what they feel about it, actually. But to me, the problem is really that the Barisan cannot get used to the idea of an opposition. So there's no respect for opposition MPs. And it's not so much respect for them, but they don't respect the fact that Malaysians have a right to vote for others. So in fact, they're not respecting our vote and our right to make a choice other than them. But it's because of more than 50 years of Barisan Nasional. So for me, I think it's process of education. I think it's a growing up process for everybody. So it's a question of time. But there are some people in the audience that I'd like to hear from, actually. I don't know, Clyde, you have a point of view about that, or anyone else would like to express their view, actually, on that?
Not now, perhaps later.
Okay.
So anyone? Yes.
Yes.
Would you be able to elaborate on what?
I get the microphone. I got the microphone.
Sorry?
You mentioned BTN.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, sure. It's the Biro Tata Negara, and what they do is, for example, if they send, this happens at universities, it happens, they actually have sessions, particularly those who are on scholarship, going overseas, and so on. They have sessions with them, which are basically brainwashing sessions. And we've had information coming out as to what is said in some of these sessions, and it's very racist. It's about how the other races, we are, shouldn't be here, and etc., etc. That's why you get these views expressed by some teachers sometimes, headmistress sometimes. It comes out. Where is it coming from? It's coming from this kind of a brainwashing, actually. And it still goes on. It's very insidious, it's very, very dangerous to me. And I think there's a whole system, and it's been going on for years. Years and years. So that's what BTN is about. That's my understanding of BTN. Of course, they will have their, what they say they're trying to achieve, but this is what actually happens.
They usually say, listen, listen, listen.
Yeah, that too.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for your excellent talk.
Thank you.
I'm not actually from Malaysia, but I take a keen interest the way the democracy is evolving in Malaysia, as well as your friendly rival, Singapore. And you did mention about the role of election commission in the last election, or what they did not do. My question is, can you tell us something about how the appointment of the Chief Election Commissioner, or whoever is the head of the Election Commission, what's the process? Is it by a committee with both opposition and ruling party, or how is that appointment done? Because that would throw a lot of light on why the Election Commission is, as you said, acting in that way.
Okay.
Perhaps you can, if that is well known to others, my apologies. As I said, I'm not so well educated about Malaysian politics.
Okay, the Election Commission is appointed under the Federal Constitution. So it's one of the few appointments, and there are some appointments, Attorney General, Auditor General, which are provided for in the Federal Constitution. The commissioners of the Election Commission is one of them. So all the commissioners are named, I mean the positions are named. So they are appointed under the Federal Constitution, of course on the advice of the Prime Minister, but there is a stipulation that the Yang di-Pertuan Agong must, when he appoints, of course the final appointment is made by the Yang di-Pertuan Agong on the advice of the Prime Minister, that he must ensure that they enjoy public confidence. So at the end of the day, really, where's the independence? Because it comes from the Prime Minister. And this is one of the...
one Prime Minister alone, or is it a... Yes, he's...
No, there's no requirement. So it's in any way that... Yeah. So at the end of the day, the question is this, you see. For me, however independent, I mean, whatever system of appointment you have, everything depends on the people who occupy those positions. Many of them are civil servants. In fact, all of them are civil servants. And we are saying you should never have civil servants in these positions because they can never be independent. Because they're so used to reporting to the government, doing what the government wants, they can't get out of that mindset or that mold. So at the end of the day, there is a reasonably good system for appointment, but it has failed completely.
Hi, this is working. Is that working?
Yeah.
Good. Ambiga, thank you so much for coming to Sydney. It's really great to have you here. I've never been very political. Haven't been really interested in politics until last year when I tried to vote in Canberra and they made it difficult for me to vote. So I got pissed off and I flew back to KL to make sure my voice got heard. And And interestingly, the BBC News interviewed me as well.
Very good.
I was working in this gentleman's on BBC News. So, you know, I guess my question is, it's good to clarify what the problems are. And if you were someone that really, frankly, didn't really care whether it was BN or PKR or whatever, and we just cared about clean elections, what do you need to win? You know, what are the top 3 things that you need to win? Do you need more money? Do you need more advertising campaigns? What do you need for us to have clean elections?
As in Bersih?
Bersih? Yeah.
Well, no, I'll tell you what we do really need, okay? But how we achieve it is something else. We need an independent election commission. That answers a lot of issues because it'll answer the gerrymandering, the media freedom, everything. So how do we get that? How do we get that? As I said, they're shameless and they don't embarrass at all. And they're still there. So how? Well, you know, that's what we want. Funding, of course, is important for Bersih. I'm no longer the chair. It's Maria who's the chair. Because of the programs that they're trying to run. Right now we're doing educating. We're educating people on how to object to gerrymandering because there is a system in place. So it's advocacy really and reaching out to the people outside. It's that kind of thing that we need, you know. I don't know whether I'm helping you by answering that question, but we need a lot. We need help. We need people to reach out. We need people who you know, basically go out there and reach people in the rural areas. That's what we need.
I think it'd be good to just have a clear strategy.
Yeah.
That someone like me can contribute to
Sure.
a clear strategy on how it's. So you asked us how do we get a clean election committee?
Yeah.
I'd like to know from you, how do we do that, and how can we contribute to that? How do we contribute to make that happen? Because it's good for us to put something on Facebook. We can all do that. But the reality is, what can we clearly contribute to that's
Sure.
going to be really effective?
Okay, Maria, we had a strategic planning meeting recently, so all those ideas will be up on the Bersih website soon. In fact, when I go back home, I will tell her that people in Sydney are asking what they can do. So there are certain key areas, okay? One of the areas that I'm sort of not in charge of, but that has been delegated to me, is in relation to bringing legal proceedings. Raising it with the court. For example, we're going to try, whether we can do it or not, we're still researching it. We're going to try and take the EC to court and to stop them doing the redelineation because they're doing it on the 13 GE electoral roll, which is flawed. So we're trying to get them to stop the redelineation until they clean up the electoral roll. We will fail, of course. So that is the part that I am in charge of. So that, for me, publicity in relation to that would be important when it happens. But there are other strategies that will be disclosed, that will be made public soon, and I hope that you all can help us in relation to that. I have suggested to Global Bersih that this publicizing of the People's Tribunal report is very important. Because everything we need to know that we have to do, the recommendations, what is required is all there. So we need to actually do advocacy work around that. And we need to get the international community as well as the Malaysians overseas interested enough to make sure that, that I suppose that we become knowledgeable about it and that we push the advocacy on that. That's all I have for the moment. But there will be some concrete steps that will be announced soon. Yeah. Thank you very much for that, and thank you for coming home to vote.
Anyone else, please indicate, raise your hand, and the mic will come to you. Yes, in the middle.
Hi, Ambiga. Yeah, you can hear me? Can you hear me?
No, where are you? Sorry, I can't.
Right in the middle.
Thank you. Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
You just mentioned about the international community. Do you find that after the general elections, there's still a lack of international community? How Obama mentioned Malaysia as a moderate Muslim country, when you actually realize that there's a lot of racial tension? Why is there still a lack of response or lack of action? Why aren't they raising questions about the elections and how unfair it was?
Okay. Let me tell you, it's the same questions that I've been asking as well. And basically the response is, look, you're not as bad as other countries. Many other countries are worse, and that's why we're seen as moderate. But I do not accept that answer. Okay? And in fact, when someone said that to me, I said, we are better than which countries? Which countries are you talking about? Because I'm talking about Singapore, I'm talking about countries around me that have sped on ahead. Which country are you talking about? Because you're talking about Zimbabwe, yeah, but we don't want to be anywhere near them. We don't want to be better than them, right? We want to be better than much more progressive countries. So there is that mindset, there is that thinking that they seem to have. And I know that countries like the United States, Australia, the UK, they condemned the Myanmar elections, but they didn't condemn ours, although the same flaws took place. So a lot of that is diplomacy, is politics, is something we won't understand fully, all right? But we have made it clear that please don't praise our system because it undermines the work that NGOs have to do and have been doing to improve democracy in our country. But at the end of the day, improving Malaysia is our battle. It's a battle for Malaysians. It's not the battle for others. But I talk about advocacy work overseas because Malaysia does care what the international community says. So I think that's where we have to leave it, okay? We cannot, our expectations of countries overseas helping us, we shouldn't have those expectations anymore. I have learned that. I have learned that. I have learned that it's our battle and that we should do what we can. But which is not to say that our friends overseas, and I'm not talking about the politicians or the diplomatic community, our friends overseas who are in the legal fields, who are in human rights, etc., or journalists overseas, have really helped the cause because they highlight these issues. They highlight them, they research them. So those are the people that I would want to reach out to because they really are interested. And they're not there just to talk politics or being diplomatic. No, they're not tied down by those sorts of things. So for example, if you get the international legal community interested in the sedition laws, for example, that we want to get rid of, that's a very useful pressure point for us. So it's that kind of thing I'm more interested in. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, Mike is coming.
Thanks, Ambiga. It's good to see you back here.
Thank you.
Your sense of encouragement for many of us. But having said that, what you have told us, in a way, is a bit of a deja vu that you see them. They are going to use whatever means to be in power by pushing the goalposts. And you describe the court cases. Is that your new role after abdicating from Bersih, that what you have described? And moving slightly away, I was in Malaysia for 5 weeks or so. I think the whole people is suffering from a bit of catharsis of the MH370. Why I say that is, the government has been able, despite the flaws you have described, but I think the whole confusion, the sadness of the people, you hear people talking everywhere in the kopitiam and in the kampongs, and they are so confused, by the whole situation, and there's a lot of rumors, theories about the pilot, the Anwar's relative, blah, blah, blah. And despite, while I was there, actually I feel, there's a lot of things that's going on. The haze in KL was terrible. The 2 days on of water, 2 days off. I moved from France to France, trying so that I can have 6 showers a day or something like that. But if you are in a condominium, it's all right because you got a big fan. You don't have to worry about that. Not only the haze, the election, the everything. I find that in a way, it's not with due respect, not a very nice situation to be in. And I think it is very, very bad, for the people. Perhaps, how do you see that, by this MH1, that the government has used it towards their advantage?
Okay, I know what you're saying, actually, because there's no doubt that the whole country is in shock and are numb with grief, that we're depressed about 370. Every morning, I know when I wake up, I want to know whether there's any news, whether they found it. So that must take center stage, rightfully. So when that takes center stage and other things become less important, it's normal. It's absolutely normal. And you're right. You're right. You're right that people now don't really want to be bothered with our other problems. That right now they want to feel this sense of unity behind the people who are suffering. And of course the government says you must unite behind the government. So people feel that they will be disloyal if they criticize the government. It's easy for them to throw that line and for people to buy it. That's what's happening at the moment. There's just such a mixture of emotions. And of course, there are some who do see the difference. They can see that when you criticize the government, it doesn't mean you're disloyal to the country. In fact, to me, it's the highest form of loyalty. And it's also aimed at finding out the truth. So there's all that mixture of feelings going on. And I think now is not a time, I suppose, to try and bring great change in the other areas. I think it's the healing process has to take place, and that will start taking place when we start getting some answers on MH370, which, God willing, will be soon enough. But you're right. I think there is a depression in the country, and I flew on Mars very happily. I love flying on Mars. What a wonderful airline it has been, and it completely breaks my heart. It was not full, and in fact in the past Sydney flights or whatever, packed, you can't even get seats. I think you all know that. It's suffering a little bit, and I feel really sad because we've got a wonderful crew. We've got wonderful wonderful pilots, people who have given their whole lives to Mars. And I think, anyway, once this period of mourning and once we get some closure, then the family gets closure, I think some hard questions need to be asked. Why is Mars in the situation that it is? Why is it it's losing money when actually it's packed, it's full all the time? Those are the things that we have to come. The hard and difficult questions have to be asked. Maybe now it's not the time to demand answers, but for me, actually, there's no better time, but we must still keep asking those questions. Now, you asked about my new role. My new role, well, I'm actually an advisor to C4. I don't know if you've heard of C4. It's an organization to combat corruption, which has been set up by that brave lady, Cynthia Gabriel, of Scorpion fame. And she and her team set up this anti-corruption body, and I was just supposed to be an advisor. But it's very interesting because MACC is actually engaging with C4. So corruption to me is the other huge problem. Huge. And until we have a commission that is prepared to prosecute even the Prime Minister for corruption, we haven't really gone anywhere.
Welcome to Sydney again, Ambiga.
Thank you.
I think we may be a bit negative in our outlook in terms of the achievements that you and a lot of people in Malaysia has. If you look at the 2008 elections, I think we did really well, and we as in the opposition did really well. And I think that, I'm from Penang, and every time I go back, I see a lot of things, a lot of positive things. So we've got a few states now, still with the PKR party. Just wondering how those, the PKR is not in a helpless situation. I think they're doing quite well, if you ask me, if you look back 10 years or 20 years ago. And I think we may be a bit ambitious in thinking that things will change overnight, but I think things are happening, things are on a positive. Quick question is, how is that going from your perspective, and how is that positive results on some of these opposition states impacting on the rest of the country and so on? There must be something positive. I mean, in Penang it's certainly positive.
I think you're right, of course. There are a lot of positive things. The very fact that we have a viable opposition is already positive. Because we have a viable opposition, many things are being questioned in Parliament. Many things are being researched, and they are put in a spot where they need to respond. Okay, the latest one is over a trip by the Deputy Prime Minister. But these questions are at least being asked. So that is because we have a reasonably viable opposition. But I think for us to be a really healthy democracy, it has to be like in the UK or in Australia or whatever, people crossing the aisle. One term you're government, the other term you're, that must be the way. That's when people then truly start being accountable. So, although I agree with you, what I do see, and I suppose a lot of people are sympathetic to the opposition because they really are fighting with one hand behind their back. There's no two ways about it, in many, many ways. And they have been for a long time. And despite that, they have done reasonably well in the elections, and that's credit to them and credit to the people of Malaysia, actually, who can see through these things. So my concern is that the system will still be used, like the gerrymandering and so on, in the 14th general elections. I'm not sure whether we can even see any great change in 14th GE, but I think there's a good chance. But still, you'd be surprised how hard they've been working, you know, and they have the resources, they have the money, they have everything. So it's a tough fight. But you're right, of course there are positives. And thank you for saying that, because at least, you know, there's hope and there's something that we've achieved, I suppose.
Hi, Ambiga. Clearly there are problems with the legal system in Malaysia, the court systems. Like you were mentioning that petitions are being thrown out based on technical issues. So do you think that there's a problem with the law or the people on the bench? And if it's either of these problems, what is the legal profession in Malaysia doing about it?
Well, I think the legal profession, well, it's actually, some of it are archaic laws, all right? There's a problem with the laws, but obviously, ultimately, at the end of the day, it's about the people who implement the laws. So it's the prosecution as well as the people on the bench. And that is the entire system of administration of justice in Malaysia. But I think the bar has been very vocal. And I think they do have access to the courts, to the Chief Justice and so on, and these things are raised constantly with them. I do know that. And I know I had to do that during my time. So there is a continuous process of this tugging and pushing and shoving, as it were, trying to get the system to work. But there are some things, but you see, it suits the powers that be for a system, some aspects of the system to continue in the way that they are. That's the problem also, ultimately. So it's not just a question of the Bar Council. It's really a question, it's systemic. It's really a question of making sure, reaffirming the necessity for the independence of all these institutions. And for that to happen, you're going to have a government who recognizes the importance of the rule of law, which is something we don't have at the moment. So all of it is interconnected. It's not just the job of the Bar Council to it can't. It's all interconnected and ultimately comes down to the people. To me, that's where elections play such a big role. But again, that's why they're so manipulated. Yeah. So I don't know if that's a good answer, but I would say that it's not just the responsibility of the Bar Council.
William.
Sorry. I just thought I'd address a couple of questions that were brought up on behalf of Global Bersih. The young lady asked just now, how come a lot of Malaysian issues are not making the headlines? And the gentleman asked, what strategies do Bersih, or Global Bersih, have in mind to allow individuals and groups outside of Malaysia to help address the issues back home? So on behalf of Global Bersih, I just want to say this. Please don't underestimate what each of you can do as individuals. You can write to your local newspapers. You can lobby your local councillors. You pay rates to these people. They are entitled to answer your questions and your concerns. You can write to members of parliament. You know, many of us overseas, when I say us, I'm talking about people who are originally from Malaysia. Some of us have given up our citizenship, but that does not mean we have lost the right to care. And we can show we care, and we can show we help in many, many ways as individuals. And just to address this thing about, is the world out there aware, I can tell you personally that at very high levels of government in the West, these issues are being addressed. And in turn, at least Britain and the US have directly brought these issues up with their counterparts in Malaysia, sometimes at ministerial level. They've spoken about the freedom of religion. They've talked about, the controversy that came up with the Allah issue, the need to reform the electoral system, and most recently, some of you may be aware, it didn't get a lot of mileage, but the US State Department itself said, and I think I'm quoting directly, we are concerned at the possible political motivations behind the prosecutions, and as Ambiga described it, the persecution of leading opposition figures in Malaysia. I mean, for the US State Department to actually say something like that, it tells us that the efforts of many Malaysians overseas are starting to pay off. And if we want to get more of a payback, I can only urge you to get in touch with Global Bersih, to go to the website, to seek out, to get your friends in other cities, to seek out Global Bersih delegates and to join them. There are plans for all sorts of programs that will raise awareness of all these issues across the world, and one way that all of us can contribute is to turn up in numbers. Numbers is strength, and every one of us can do that. So, it's been said that change has to come from within Malaysia, which is of course true. I would just like to add one little thing to that, and to lift that up a little bit, and to say change can come from all Malaysians and all former Malaysians. And in this global world of ours, change can come from anywhere. All we need to do is show we care, because even that show of support brings a lot of comfort to the people back in Malaysia. I mean, we are sitting here free to speak, free to express our opinions, and that's because we, for many reasons, have been free to leave. Our friends and our families are there, and as Ambiga says, and we are very grateful, I'm personally very grateful to hear Ambiga say, we are not going anywhere, we are staying in Malaysia. That gives me a lot of faith and a lot of inspiration. So I'm just suggesting that all of us, all your friends, can do a lot. Just keep in touch with what Bersih is doing, with what Global Bersih is doing, and whenever we announce a program or invite you for a forum like this, turn up, If there's a queue out there that stretches all the way down to QBB, all the better. Bring your friends the next time. It's been very, very difficult for us to reach students for some reason in Sydney. And we need you. We need young Malaysians, we need young former Malaysians, and we need lovers of freedom. So there's a lot you can do. That's what I want to say. Thank you.
Everybody hasn't giving Ambiga a chance to sit down. She's been actually travelling since she only arrived this morning. She must be really tired. But she's toughing it out. So this is your last chance. I think we should. We need to be out of here by 8. Yeah. So last chance to a couple of last questions. Yes, over this side. 2. A woman in the front and somebody behind the post. I can't see on your hand. Okay, gotcha.
Ambiga, hi. Thanks for coming. I might just take the opportunity on the back of that to maybe ask a very general question. I think a lot of what's sort of prevailing at the moment among the young people. And I know William said it's hard to read students, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fear, because there are a lot of consequences that can really affect their future, and I think that's what's holding them back. And whether it is for young people like me who have actually come to Sydney to study, or whether for those of them who are serving the government back home, I think there's a very paralyzing fear about what the consequences can be, not only for the individual, and I know many of us, we'd love to to get our pitchforks and and just go for the right thing. It's not about supporting one team over the other. I think it's more about having the freedom to do it, and ensuring that it's not only the freedom to choose, but then, like you say, to have a clean and clear election. So how do you advise young people to get around that? Because essentially, putting them on the front line could mean a lot of things. So I'll give you a very simple example. Let's say if a young person is caught by the police, for whatever reason, and the police have so many avenues, so they can use any one of the clauses against you. And then if you're listed, as having this crime recorded against your name, at any given time, if you want to apply for a visa to get out of the country, everything is affected. So essentially, I don't think it's just parents. The entire family wants to hold young people back for their sake. So what would you say to these young people, whether they are currently abroad or in Malaysia, and they're very, very willing and wanting to be part of this very noble cause? So what do we do, essentially, is what you're asking.
Okay. Hello. To start with, first of all, thank you, William, for raising all those issues. And I think perhaps I was not very fair to the people who have worked very hard and have actually got results. I think my criticism was more the heads of government who were coming out and saying how wonderful our democracy was. So yes, but thank you for pointing that out and pointing out that there are things everyone can do. As far as this is concerned, I mean, look, everybody contributes in the way they can, all right? Just because you can't come to a Bersih rally doesn't mean you don't support it. You can't support it in any other way. I think where students are concerned, where scholarships are concerned, we do understand if you can't and you're not prepared to take a stand. But when it comes to things like you hold, you want to invite someone to speak, and then the authorities say you're banned, that is directly related to your academic freedom. And I would expect students to take a stand on that. So there are some things, yes, maybe you're not so vociferous, but some things that you should be vociferous about. But having said that, for me, the best advice would be, if there is any kind of pressure or that they are applying in relation to students, you must publicize it. And for that to happen, unfortunately, you need support. You can't have 2 students out of 50 being brave, and then they will, of course, be the ones that the authorities will gun for. The other students actually shouldn't remain silent. If you have friends who are prepared to step forward and do the right thing, then what it calls for is support of all the other students as well. Because in numbers, that's where the strength lies, where students are concerned. So my own view is, at the end of the day, you have to find your own voices in that sense. I understand the problems. This is why government servants also are afraid to speak up, because it's their livelihood. But I say to some of them who are there doing in very responsible positions, sorry, that's not a good answer for me. Where you are not doing the right thing, it's not a good answer to say that I have to keep quiet because otherwise I will lose my job. At some point, that has to stop. But where students are concerned, I do appreciate that your positions are different and difficult. But I think, you know what? The world is at your feet. If people are going to put pressure on you, and people are going to bully you, it's really time to stand up. That's my own view. It's my personal view. Because, and especially if they're affecting your thought process, if they're affecting the way you think, the way you do things, you should take a stand. But I do appreciate it's easier said than done. So for me, actually, there's safety in numbers, and that's what you should look for. If you have enough numbers of people, of students who are prepared to speak up, what can they do at the end of the day? And if they bully you, publicize it. And I know they have. I think, well, with Bersih they did. I think they punished some students, took away their scholarship, you know, but publicize it and we'll just have to fight it together. Yeah.
Hello, Dr. Ambiga. First of all, welcome to Sydney. And also my apology for being too casual today because off day today, and on my way to pick up my daughter from school, and I learned from someone that is meet and greet, so I changed my mind last minute and came here. Okay, my question is very similar to the question that the lady talked about. This is more to do with civil servants. Last year when I went back to Malaysia and talked to some of my distant relatives there who come from a civil servant background and talk about the voting, actually they told me that because as being a civil servant, they're in some kind of pressure that they need to vote for a certain party, and looks like they don't have the freedom to vote. Because my understanding is like our vote should be secret, that they shouldn't find out actually who we voted for. But unfortunately, like that, this relative told me that they kind of have no choice. So I worry that what I heard from her is probably represented the most part of the majority of the public servants, that they probably don't have any choice to vote, and they have a fear that eventually they can be tracked down, like who they vote for, and then the stake probably is too high because they have built a career for almost whole life on public service, and yeah, the stake will be too high. So I think that's a concern.
That was one of the problems, actually. The vote is supposed to be secret, no doubt about it. It's supposed to be. Yeah? There may be ways that they can find out in some areas, for example, in army and all that, they might be able to. But a lot of it is also the fear that it may not be secret. It may well be secret, but there's a fear, oh, they may find out. And they go around telling people, we know. We will know how you vote. You see? So we were actually going around saying they cannot tell how you vote if, you know, according to the law and according to the way it's run. So it was a problem, frankly. So you had husbands, for example, who were government servants. They'll say, okay, I have to vote for the government, no choice, you go and tell the wife, and he tells the wife, you go and vote for the opposition. But yeah, it was a big problem. And that's why they know. You see, like Putrajaya is very hard, because civil servants will definitely vote for the government. It's very hard to capture Putrajaya. So there you are. That's and unfortunately, it's an internal a mindset battle and an internal battle. There are people who got over it and are voting against the government, even though they work in government. So it can be done. So, but you're right. They are frightened in that way, and they're told, "We will know, you know, how you vote." Yeah.
I just wanted to say something about being a student and being afraid of the repercussions of putting yourself up there in quote-unquote subversive activities. It's beginning to become a badge of honor. So if you are doing that, I know that because my brother was hiring someone, and part of their screening process is to check what they've done online. And the first thing that this interviewee said to him was that, you know, this is something that I did. I went for the Bersih rally, you know, and I just want to let you have a heads up, you know, if you have a problem with that, you know, I can understand and whatever, but you know, that's what I have done. I don't want it to be a surprise to you. That person was hired. So I mean, this is leading up to a question. What is the business, the private sector, is there an ally, I don't know, some form of ally forum by which we could channel resources to support? I think it's a badge of honor. I'll hire someone who dares to speak out more than someone that's just completely complicit in a really unjust system. So I'm just putting it out there. I'm wondering whether in the private sector, in Malaysia or here, where is a forum by which we're able to pull resources together to, fund research for people who are doing work and things like that. Is there a forum like that? Just a question too.
Thank you for that suggestion. There are NGOs and many NGOs and coalitions working together. But it would be nice if there was a steady structure whereby we wouldn't have to worry about money. As you know, money is always a problem for NGOs because governments will never support NGOs. And then if we take money from overseas organizations, you get slammed. And all sorts of things can happen. So at the moment, I can't think of any offhand. But what I can tell you is this, that you will be surprised how many private organizations at home support Bersih. Okay? And how more and more people are ready to come out and say, oh, we support the opposition. They don't fear that anymore, which is why I'm saying you're dealing with a country that has had the same government for more than 50 years. There is a mindset problem. That mindset problem is what we need to get over. But the good news is, I actually see it happening in Malaysia. I do see it happening in Malaysia. So there you are. It affects my involvement in Bersih. Has it affected my work? Of course it has. There's certain people who won't give me work. But then there are others who will, because they may want to take on the government. So there are people who are now not looking at these issues as something that is so subversive that they should be afraid of it. So there is a change, actually, I'm glad to say. Yeah.
Hi, Dr. Ambiga. I'd like to add on to the questions raised by the student who raised about international students and also his brother. I also am an international student previously, and I'd like to thank the Australian government because I applied for a scholarship as part of my PhD to go on exchange, and I put in my CV and in my application my involvement in Bersih and all the activities that we do here. And fortunately for me, I'm able to get this opportunity to go to China for a research exchange for up to a year, and I can go anywhere else in Asia for another 4 months. So there's nothing you should be afraid of, and yes, my parents do tell me back then, it's bad, it's dangerous, but look at where I am now. I'm still here. And also, the experience overseas is something that you will not get back home, because say for me, I watched a YouTube video of the 14-year-old students in groups questioning the Australian Prime Minister about gay marriage, about the human rights of the boat people. In Malaysia, when I was 15 years old, I was busy with affairs that are unrelated to national affairs. And this awareness that you get overseas must be treasured and must be put to good use. But I think we are putting the government of the day in a very antagonistic manner. We're treating them like they are our enemies. In fact, I myself, I try to get involved in their activities here in Sydney, and I find that what they focus on is to build you up as a person. They focus on trying to get you into jobs. But therefore, these people who experience their efforts, they are thankful to them, because the key point is they get a job. The key point is they learn something out of the activities that are funded by the government. But what I think is lacking in Malaysia is the vision. What separates somebody in terms of their ability is not education, it's an ability to see. So if you get this vision, appreciate it, and you have to put yourself in other people's shoes so that you will learn more things. That's what I want to say, and I think it's not more like a question, it's more like a statement now.
Hi, Ambiga. I just wanted to add that we had, I think, Stephen Gunn and his partner, they're all students, they were students here, and he now runs Malaysia Kini, right? They founded Malaysia Kini. I mean, they were students, and they went back and they found Malaysia Kini, and without Malaysia Kini and Malaysia Insider and all these other ones, we wouldn't be able to win the election. We wouldn't have gone where we are with the G13 elections. That's one. The other thing is, Bersih has inspired us so much with the rallies. We are so many more years before we go to the next elections. I believe that the Bersih rallies were so inspiring, not just for Malaysians taking part there, but for us Malaysians overseas. For Malaysians taking part there, I believe it moved a lot of people who are fence-sitters to have known and to read the stories on the internet about those who were fence-sitters and decided they would go. And to also see students standing in the front lines with, with political parties and with, everyone else. What I'm saying is that it's a long time before the next elections for these inspiring things to move us again. But we have all these other issues. I know this is not the time, the MH370 to call it Bersih 4 rally, but we have all these other issues with Kapal and Anwar and all that is seeing them gain more and more ground with more and more political opposition people losing their seats in parliament. So although Bersih rally is all about election issues, and because the next elections is, again, as I said, far away, this idea that we shouldn't be, Bersih cannot be seen as partisan to any party, but just strictly talking about elections, seem to let us get away with the opportunity of inspiring the population to do something. And it seems like we got to wait too late, getting this last minute dash to inspire people to do things. So I'm wondering whether or not we should try and get, a little bit outside just elections to inspire rallies, because surely the people in the urban areas who take part in these such inspiring rallies, you can see the photographs and their hair stand on end, that they would go back to the kampong to inspire and educate the rural areas, which is where we are not reaching. The mindset is there. And so even if we had gerrymandering, if we could get to the rural areas, we'd be able to have inroads there. So what can we do with this restriction of Bersih that we cannot be partisan,
I think it has to be cause-based. That's what we mean by not partisan, because we are critical of the opposition as much as we are critical of the government. If there is a breach in anything that we see as undermining free and fair elections. Now, here's the thing. The cause to me has to be very clear. And I think Bersih has to stick to its cause of free and fair elections. There are many other organizations, and many of us actually belong to many of these organizations anyway. Human rights organizations who do take up the issue of Karpal Singh and sedition and so on. You're right. But you know something? Rallies is one thing, and it has its moments, it has its uses, and it was very effective in the run-up to GE13. That was also because it was close to the elections, and we were seeing so much of cheating going on, people were prepared to come out and make a stand. But when in this time that we have before the next GE13, my own view is that we have to educate. That's where the challenge lies. And when you educate the rural population and you actually inspire with knowledge, it is more enduring in that sense. And that is what our task has to be at this point. And I think you will find, I mean, if a rally has to be had, it will be had. The timing, you will know the moment. I remember always saying to people, when they said, why do you pick this date or that date, I always say to them, timing is critical when you have a rally. It is absolutely critical, otherwise you will lose the whole emotion and the support that you want. Timing, and you will know when the time is right. So now is not the time for a rally, I think, right now. Now is the time for educating. But having said that, I know that there is a rally on the 1st of May for the GST. Bersih hasn't taken a stand on it yet, I'm sure they will soon. So what is encouraging is you actually see different groups taking to the lead. It doesn't have to be Bersih all the time. Because when different groups take the lead, that means different people are empowered. And the more people who are empowered, the more likely that they are going to, in turn, inspire different people. So, for me, it is a few things, actually. The answer to that is a few things. One is that the type of work we have to be doing from now until the next GE13, a lot of it lies in education. A lot of it lies in education at this point.
Hello, Ambiga. It's getting quite late now, so is there anybody who's desperately wants... yes.
Just a very short one. Hello, Ambiga. Thanks for coming to Sydney. I guess it's a comment as well as a question in regards to a lot of things that have been discussed here. But I'm interested more as a sort of a lay person who's not had a lot of time or experience within political, I guess, interests. And in terms of how people can be engaged in this kind of narratives, less so with a kind of a lot of knowledge, but rather in a kind of take-home message, like 3 top points kind of thing. And it speaks to kind of my experience, I guess, and it's really hard to pick, to find where you can advocate for, where you can make a change. And sometimes it seems like this kind of melange of things is so so hard to find where you can really contribute to. I guess it speaks to, I wonder whether the education side of things, there's a better way to package this kind of messages so that it's in bite-sized chunks that people are able to see, they're able to affect some change in. And also in terms of for students as well, the idea that sometimes there's so many conflicting priorities in life that you have to go through, that sometimes politics might not be a very big thing that you want to concentrate on, and sometimes the issue of safety or issue of conflict zones is being challenged. So I wonder what kind of simple messages that we can utilize to reach out to these people who might not be interested in this, but who are able for us to then kind of bring them on board.
Okay. There's no doubt that really the only way is to hit the trail and to meet them and to speak to them, and I suppose opposition also has to do its work in this regard, and civil society certainly has to do that, and the messaging has to be simple. You see, clean and fair elections everybody can understand. And Helen, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we will not have a Bersih rally. It will happen if it is necessary, and the one thing that may actually that may inspire another rally will be if they mess us around on the redelineation. We have to do something, because if they get their way on the redelineation, GE14 will be exactly the same as GE13. Nothing is going to change. So don't underestimate the power of the Bersih rally for that. So you may get your wish sooner than you think, because if they mess us around on the redelineation, I think we have no choice. But what I'm saying is that there are other things that we also have to do, and that's education. So when you say make things simple, you're absolutely right. There's no point talking to them about Universal Declaration of Human Rights or what. They won't understand what you're talking about. You see, why did the rural population understand NFC? Like that. Everybody, straight away. Because it was something that was so very close to their hearts. They could understand it immediately. So that's how you're right. It has to be in those bite-sized type of, messaging. And I think we have to find a way. For starters, we've got to get familiar with all the languages, in the country. With the Indian population, maybe people have to start speaking to them in Tamil. And Malays, we have to speak to them, Malays we have to speak anyway because that's our national language. We must know Malay. No doubt about that. But maybe with the Chinese speaking, you have to use, So there are many ways you have to communicate, but you need to make them understand what it is we're trying to say. So yes, it is a challenge. It is a challenge that we are also actually facing at the moment because redelineation is not easy to explain, Not easy to explain, okay? So that's one of the things we're trying desperately to get people to understand that they must take part.
Okay, I'm going to take one last question from Kim Hot here, and then I think we'll have to wrap up after that.
I've got two questions.
That's very sneaky.
The first one is this. As I look at Malaysia, I wasn't interested. I left the country in 1980. I decided, I took my EPF straight away, right? I had no intention of ever going back to Malaysia because of what transpired before then, right? In 2007, I had a friend say, Kim, go ahead and go. They have done something different. And the people are starting to vote out UMNO, BN, whatever. So I went and had a look. I logged into RPK, right? And sort of followed RPK until I got turned off. And now I'm more into Malaysian Chronicle. But when I look at what's happening in Malaysia, in spite of the fact that the opposition has gained the support of the people, and 2013 has actually had a majority vote, right? In this country, and in the West, and in the most civilized country, I'm sorry I got to say that, right? The ruling party, they won because of the gerrymander, right? But they would have a sense of, like you say, a sense of shame, a sense of what is right, what is not. It looks like the UMNO, BN just don't have that. And I don't think there's going to be any different. I'm very pessimistic about what's going to happen in GD14. And in my mind, I was thinking, perhaps you need something like a people's power, a la Corazon Aquino, a la the overthrow of Suharto. Do we need that in Malaysia? Because there's no respect for the rule of law in Malaysia. Absolutely none. Question number 2.
Oh, that was already. Yes.
Question number 2. There are more than 100,000 Malaysians here who have taken over the citizenship, who's got the right to vote. But somehow, we have not used that. We had to learn something from the Jewish people. The Jewish people exert a lot of influence, not because they are rich, but because they are very articulate. Somehow we've got to make the political party understand there are more than 100,000 votes here, and it makes a difference if you don't vote for them in marginal seats. I think Bersih would have, Global Bersih got to do a little bit more. I'm sorry, you guys, you leaders, you guys are doing a great job, William, Peter. But I think we've got to do a bit more. Somehow organize ourselves, make the political parties just, take a little bit care. When we say majority of us, maybe 99% of us are not really in favor of UMNO here. Thank you.
Well, I agree with the second statement, is more of a statement. And I think that's what Global Bersih is about. So, that's very useful. On the first point, okay, here's the thing. There is no doubt that after GE13, because the support for the Barisan Nasional is largely from the Malay voter base, UMNO has gone very far right. They were already right, but they've swung. which is why you got the racist rhetoric that was coming up. To me, they may not be embarrassed, but they are insecure. And that makes them more dangerous because they have power, they're insecure. So they will do things to ensure that they stay in power. No doubt about it, they've already started. I too am concerned, yes, because of the gerrymandering, because I think they're going to ensure that that's going to keep them in power. And they have the money. They have the money, they have everything at their disposal. So, but despite all of that, all the power that they had and all the cheating that they did, they still didn't win the majority the vote. So that's why I think there is hope. I don't want to be naive. I'm not naive, I'm realistic. But which is why I'm saying our work starts now as well. In fact, it started the day after GD13. And I have actually suggested to the opposition that they should actually name candidates now and send their candidates out to those constituencies and get the local constituents, the population, familiar with their candidates. So we are trying to work, and all of us want to work within the system. That's what we want. The Bersih rallies was not about taking over the government. It was about expressing a stand. But if they keep pushing the people to a point where we have no recourse, because the police are not listening, the government is not listening, the courts, everywhere you go there is a brick wall, then it will give rise to a people power movement. You can't help it. That's the way it happens. So we are still willing to work within the system. So if I were the government, I would start listening.
I think that's all we have time for now. We have to really vacate this place. But I want to make an appeal for a collection. Who's got the box? Is that the entrance? And William can explain what it's for. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming. I hope I'm not preempting anything. Ambiga? No? I came on stage just now, and maybe some of you are wondering, who is this person just walking up thinking he can address the crowd? Well, we need to set the record straight. Full disclosure, Global Bersih is now a legal entity. We registered, I thank you. We registered as a non-government organization in Geneva, where our statutes and other official papers have been lodged. We chose Geneva because if we had registered as a Malaysian organization, we would be, how do you want to put it, beholden or victim to the Registrar of Societies, and that's not what we want to do. We are basically the global advocacy arm of Bersih in KL. Maria knows exactly what we are doing. Ambiga and a lion of a man, Pak Samad, have agreed very graciously to be our patrons. And one of the things that we want to do, apart from lobby international media and governments, is to help Bersih and to give Malaysians and former Malaysians who have left Malaysia to still feel that they can have ownership over the future of a very beautiful country that we all come from. So we are going to try and raise as much funds as we can. All these funds will be totally accounted for as provided for in our statutes. We are required to submit, I think, accredited accounts at the end of every financial year, which we will do. So I know some of you have already donated and donated very generously before you came in. But now that you know what Global Bersih is about, and keep in mind that we also want to send money home. Because as much as the private sector is helping, Bersih can do with as much help as it can get. So we will leave the boxes outside. Thank you very, very much for coming, and see what you can do for Malaysia.
Okay, thank you everybody here, and all for those who helped organize tonight. I want you to now express your thanks and a big applause to Ambiga for coming. And thanks to William, Andrew, Kevin, Logan, Zichian, Nicholas, and whoever I forgot who was in the organizing group.